welcome to this Bright Blue Ludgate Lecture. For those of you who don't know Bright Blue, we are an independent centre-right think tank that seeks to defend and improve liberal society. Our values are that we are pro-market, liberal, meritocratic, internationalist and institutionalist. Our Ludgate Lecture series happens once a month, and we invite very high-profile speakers to inform us, to challenge us, to inspire us. I'm delighted today that we're joined by His Excellency Pedro Serrano, who is the EU ambassador to the UK. We really want to kind of amplify the messages which are coming from this lecture. So if you're using X, please use the hashtag #BrightBlue. And you'll be able to ask questions towards the end of this session, and you can do that through the Slido link, which is just below your YouTube channel where you're watching this Ludgate lecture. So it does seem that the Labour government are wanting and signalling very clearly that they want a closer relationship with the EU, a closer one than the agreement that was negotiated after Brexit under the Johnson government. And there has been improved relations. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, became the first PM to join the EU summit since Brexit. There have been some new agreements, for example, on food safety standards. And of course, as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there has been closer security and defence partnerships between the EU and the UK. But what more can and should be done to strengthen the relationship between the UK and the EU? Only today, for example, we found that negotiations have broken down around the UK's access to the EU's defence fund, SAFE. And we do know that the UK public have become more and more sceptical of Brexit in terms of the advantages that it has brought to the UK. Lots of the public, the majority, are sceptical of that. And there's emerging evidence that not having access to European markets, particularly the customs union and the single market, has had an impact on our exports of goods and particularly services, which the UK is obviously dominant in. So we're delighted to have this Ludgate Lecture with His Excellency Pedro Serrano, who is, as I say, the current EU ambassador to the UK, previously served as Chief of Staff to the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, and was previously also the diplomatic advisor to the President of the European Council. Pedro is going to speak to us for about 20 minutes. I'm then going to ask him questions, and then we're going to open it up to you in the audience. So Pedro, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ryan, and what a pleasure to be here and to address this very important issue. I would start by saying that the relationship between the EU and the UK is not optional. We are indispensable partners to each other. And if anything, the war in Ukraine and the moments that we're living currently in trying to find a solution towards a ceasefire that will stop this horrible war and that will allow us to rebuild a European security worthy of the name, and of course to protect Ukraine as it needs to be protected, reminds us the importance of this cooperation. I have to say that the European Union and the United Kingdom have been working hand in glove in supporting Ukraine from day one. And today it's even more important. So the relationship, essential. It's essential for our security. It's essential for the defense of Europe. It's essential for our own prosperity and our citizens. I mean, we have double nationals of all sorts between the United Kingdom and Europeans. We have 1 million United Kingdom citizens living within the European Union. This is are settled, sorry. Those are that were living before and that have a special status. There are many more living in the in the European Union, and 5 million settled citizens, UK EU citizens living in the UK. So the relationship is very intense. It's a relationship that has been built over the centuries. We share a continent. We share a continent and all the interests that entails. And if we want the security of this continent, if we want to ensure that, if we want to ensure that the continent remains meaningful internationally, strong relationship between the EU and the UK is vital. Strong UK is important and vital for the EU. A strong EU is important and vital for the United Kingdom. So I just wanted to make that very, very clear from the outset. And if you go to even more the material issues, you just look at the trade relationships between the EU and the UK. 47% of the trade of the United Kingdom is in trade in goods and services, exports, imports, is with the European Union. You can compare that with around 17% for the US trade and 6% with the trade with China, which are the other major partners for the UK. So the significance of the relationship cannot be stressed enough. Now, after Brexit, we agreed on we have a number of agreements that rule the relationship, that manage the relationship. As you know, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. We have a withdrawal agreement that includes also references to how our citizens that were residing in the UK and the EU before Brexit will have their rights respected, the residence right respected. We have an agreement as well in order to manage the Northern Ireland, which requires a special arrangements because Northern Ireland remains part of the single market, but remains as well, of course, is part of the United Kingdom and part of the internal market of the United Kingdom as it should be. But to manage that, which is a very difficult equation, we have a special agreement which was reached, I think, in 2023, the Windsor Framework. So all this is the backbone right now of our relationship. And the question is, should this be improved and can it be improved? And the answer to both is yes. And the answer that both the EU and its leaders and the UK leaders have given to this is yes, let's do it. And it was very clear. Actually, Prime Minister Starmer has repeated it, not just in very clear terms last Monday in an important speech that he delivered in Guildhall. And our leaders are saying it as well constantly. But it was a commitment in the manifesto, the electoral manifesto of Labour, to move towards this reset. And we started moving very quickly on both sides. Actually, the United Kingdom, the new Labour government, appointed even a dedicated cabinet minister, Nick Thomas-Symonds, for the relationship with the European Union, which has been, I think, proved a very valuable asset. And on our side, we have a commissioner, Commissioner Šefčovič, Maroš Šefčovič, that is also has as part of his responsibilities the relationship with the European Union. So we have a good setup and a solid setup. We started working very actively after the elections on this reset or renewal of the relationship or strengthening of the relationship. You can call it in many different ways. And we reached a turning point this year with the May 19th summit, in which for the first time, I think you were referring to this, after Brexit, the President of the European Council, President of the Commission came to London, met with the Prime Minister and concluded a series of agreements, including a joint statement, which is important in the sense that it changes a narrative or brings forward a new narrative for the relationship, a narrative that insists on the importance of the strengthening of this relationship and how vital it is to both sides. We have a common understanding, which is a document in which constitutes in reality a roadmap for things that we have to develop. And we have a specific agreement on security and defense partnerships that was also concluded at the time. And now we're in the implementation phase of these various agreements. And you could say that the agreements have five main pillars. You have a security pillar, and migration pillar, a defense pillar, a prosperity pillar, and a person or people-to-people contact pillar. And they're all, I think, supporting each other in various ways. We started negotiations on a number of these pillars. If you want, I will start with the prosperity pillar, which I think is of key importance. On prosperity, not only we reached an agreement on fisheries for the mutual access to waters for our fishermen, and here it's important to note that 70% of the catches of UK fishermen and women go to markets in the European Union. So 70% of that. So the fisheries industries of the UK has as a main customer, even more than the local, than domestic customers, it's the EU customers. We have, and that we reached an agreement, but an agreement that can be complemented actually in fisheries by a broader agreement, the sanitary and phytosanitary agreement, an SPS agreement, as we call it, which will facilitate the exchange of agri-food products between the UK and the EU. And here, I'll just give another number, 58% of the exports of agri-food goes to the market of the European Union. Of UK exports go to the market in the European Union. And this actually was a sector that suffered after Brexit, especially because it is integrated by many small and medium enterprises that could not cope well with the administrative costs and additional hurdles that any FTA has. So this is something that is very typical of FTAs. And of course, an FTA will never be able to replace belonging to the same market. So there's additional costs for certificates, inspections, controls, and the purpose now with this SPS agreement is to get rid of those certificates and those controls. And this is what we have just started negotiating. It will be an important agreement. It affects a community in the UK of over 1 million workers. So it's not a negligible and we hope that a lot of benefits will come to UK, of course, producers. Of course, there will also be benefits for EU producers. So we're doing things that are mutual interest of both sides. But it is an important agreement that we started negotiating. There's also a very important agreement that has an offer that has been made by the European Union to the United Kingdom, which is to join the electricity market of the European Union. And this is a market of 450 million consumers. Most of what the UK is investing in wind production, for example, North Sea and elsewhere, gains all its meaning if it has a broader market and not only the domestic market. So its linkage with the European Union will be of great benefit to all the investors in the electricity production and green electricity production in the UK. And in addition to that, we will be helping each other, of course, in terms of energy security, which is key. In reality, if you look at our economies, we provide resilience to each other, definitely in the field of electricity, but beyond electricity. We are safe, we're safe parts of the production chain. And therefore in supply chains to each other. We belong to the same ecosystem of resilience. And what we're going to do on SPS, what we're going to do on the electricity union and joining the UK, joining the electricity union, will be helping the resilience of our economies and will help, of course, and give greater possibilities to our own producers and companies. We're also working, as you know, on linkages, as we call them, between emission trading systems. And this is important in order to avoid carbon taxes. We will start implementing our carbon tax in January, and the UK will start a bit later down the line. But if we have an agreement linking our ETS, our emission trading systems, we will avoid charging each other for carbon taxes and make trade again easier amongst us. So these are some of the key agreements in terms of prosperity. We've also reached or agreed to agree on defense-related issues. And here you mentioned that there had been a few days ago, you called it a breakdown in negotiations in SAFE. I would say we have a pause in negotiations in SAFE. But even with that pause, which means that the negotiations could start again, and there's no, if the UK so wishes, we can continue negotiations. But even without negotiations, the SAFE, which is called Security Action for Europe, which is a facility, it's a loan facility of up to 150 billion euros for joint procurement by member states. And even without an additional agreement, the UK and UK companies are already invited to participate in this instrument. UK companies based in the UK can participate with up to 35% content in projects that will be financed through SAFE. UK companies based in the EU will be able to participate in those projects. And the UK itself, the UK government, may join other member states of the European Union in joint procurement endeavors that will be financed through SAFE. So the cooperation on defense projects through that concrete mechanism is there. It's open. It can be a reality if, of course, UK businesses think it's an attractive reality, and we believe it is, and we are sure that they're going to want to benefit from many of these projects, because our defense industry, both in the UK and in the rest of the European Union, is also very closely linked. They do a lot of work together, a lot of projects together. So there will be many, many possibilities and important possibilities and opportunities for UK defense companies on this. On maybe related to defense, just to say, on foreign affairs more broadly, we have agreed as well to increase the number of exchanges and consultations between our departments. We have agreed to invite Foreign Secretary, Defense Secretary to come to meetings in the Council with the rest of the ministers of the European Union. We have agreed to have consultations twice a year between the Foreign Secretary and the High Representative, which, as you know, is our equivalent Foreign Secretary. So there's an area of cooperation on foreign security policy, which is very important, that I did not want to not to refer to, because I think it is very important. On security and migration, we're also going to be increasing, and negotiations and discussions on this are ongoing, increasing cooperation through our border agency, Frontex, through our police agency, Europol, through a greater exchange of criminal data. And there are mechanisms to ensure that we can exchange those data more effectively than we have been doing up to now. So, and of course, fighting criminal gangs, and particularly criminal gangs that are responsible for irregular migration. And for the UK, this would mean those that are crossing illegally the channel. And so we want to fight those gangs. They put in danger the lives of people, and of course they create difficulties and challenges for our societies on all sides. We are also in the EU suffering from irregular channels of migration into the EU, and we're working actively to control that. There's a very important program which has nothing to do with the UK, but will have positive impact on the UK, which is the Migration Pact in the European Union, which will limit flows crossing uncontrolled in an uncontrollable way through European Union territory, which means that ultimately less migrants would reach the border to cross into the UK. So that's also, I think, something positive. And we've agreed as well to associate the UK into some of the fora where we're engaging with countries of origin and transit, and to engage also jointly together more in those discussions with countries of origin and transit. And a final point, because I've been talking perhaps already too much, but I think I'm within the 20 minutes that you gave me still, just to underline the relevance of the people-to-people contact. And here we have two main projects on the table that have been offered. One is the rejoining by the UK of Erasmus Plus, which is, as you know, the program for exchanges between universities, also vocational training, schools, teachers, sports clubs. And the second is what we call a youth experience scheme, which is a youth mobility scheme. The UK has mobility schemes with many partner countries. The EU is the closest partner to the UK. It would be a bit odd that we didn't work on something similar. And so we are also looking at how we can advance to allow young people from the UK or to travel to Europe, to work if they want to for a number of years, to study, to who knows, to marry, or at least to make friends, and the same in the other direction. And why is this important? It is important because we have to ensure, and this is a strategic goal, medium, long term. We have to ensure that our societies keep talking to each other, keep understanding each other in a deeper way than just a few beers and disco hours in the beaches of my beloved country, or vice versa. People coming here in London to watch, and not only London, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, wherever in this amazing country that is the United Kingdom, to enjoy the beauties and all the cultural and all the culture that it offers. We need something that goes deeper than that. And for that, both schemes, the Erasmus and the youth experience scheme, will provide our young people with deep experiences of what each other's lands mean to each other in order to ensure that we keep a united Europe. And I end here referring to what I started. We need a united and a strong Europe, and a united and strong Europe starts with our citizens understanding that we're part of the same continent, we have the same interests, and we have to continue working together. Many thanks.
Many thanks, Ambassador. That was fantastic, very thorough, and I learned a lot, actually. There were things that I didn't know which were happening in terms of negotiations between the EU and the UK, which you've enlightened me on. Certainly agree with you on the need for a kind of deeper exchange and understanding between the EU and the UK, and we continue to have forums to do that, including, of course, this Ludgate Lecture that we have now. And I certainly agree with you that it needs to be more than just in bars, fancy bars on beaches in southern European countries. Unfortunately, I don't think there's many fancy bars and beaches in the UK. We're not well renowned for that. But I take your point. So I'm going to ask you some questions now. The first is, it strikes me that the perennial problem in the relationship between the UK and the EU is that the UK has largely seen the European Union, and why we joined the common market in the first place is for access to a frictionless market. It's largely for economic purposes. And now the Labour government are seeking better deals for better access to markets. And there's things which they're seeking around the harmonization of professional qualifications for service industries, stuff around veterinary checks to kind of reduce when you bring pets into the EU. So it's always the case that the UK is pushing for that kind of sort of more economic integration. But it seems that the pushback from the EU has always been, well, we want more freedom in terms of migration. And that strikes me at what has been at the heart of the problem, that the UK wants to enjoy the accesses of a large market without many frictions, but the EU in return thinks there should be freedom of movement. So my ask to you now is, and my question to you is, do you think that is really at the heart of the fundamental problem to why there's been tension? And if the UK wants to go further in getting more access to the EU market, what do we need to concede in terms of migration policies for the EU to allow that to happen?
No, thank you. Thank you for that. I do not see it exactly as you do, and definitely not the migration, what you call the migration angle, and the freedom of movement angle. I think the project of the European Union was from the outset a political project. Although it did start, and it was the famous words of Schuman, it did start, let's say, more modestly, dealing with economic cooperation and growing from there. I would say that most European member states wanted to grow way beyond just an access to markets. And we have to also acknowledge that just access to markets is really not just access. Just access to markets is a very complex issue that entails standards, I mean, it's a very complex construct and requires a very complex governance structure as well, and policy structure. So this is not only, I sell you what I produce and then you buy me or you sell me in exchange. No, it's about policy, it's about standards, it's about goals, and you start building. And inevitably, you have to start building if you're going to develop further. And then if you really look at the world we're facing, can any of our countries really do well on its own? I would say that most European member states would say, no, we cannot. The world is more complex, becomes way bigger than what it was in the past, with greater competition, with greater security challenges and threats. And if we are to face those challenges in a more effective way, we can do it by working more closely together. And the working more closely together, again, you start adding elements of policy, security policy, defense policy, foreign policy, and it becomes a much broader construct. So the market approach, which is a very nice and simple vision, cannot just work in an isolated manner. You need to bring more things. You want more market integration? What do you do with professions? You were saying the equivalence between the professional qualifications and things of the sort. That is a very complex issue. It entails education policy. I mean, it's really so. There's no once you start building and what is a very ambitious project, it continues to grow beyond, because at the end, if we want to be a strong Europe, we need to bring all those pieces together. Otherwise, there are many other stronger actors that are going to tell us what to do, or we may have real difficulties in engaging in an effective way in that broader market. A market of 450 million inhabitants with 18 trillion of GNP, that weighs in the world. That is a partner that you can deal with, that can help shape decisions at global level. There's countries that are, and let's talk about the largest European nations, 3 trillion, which is already a lot. Not to mention those below 2 trillion, not to mention many who are way below that. You do not weigh in the world, not in the same way as if you have that market of 18 trillion. If you add to that market of 18 trillion is full with people that have a common past, a common history, then you're looking at another type of reality. So I don't see it in terms of migration or just market. I see it in terms of what we are in the world of today, and whether we can make a difference or not in the world of today. And one of the big differences that we can make also is continuing to push for a fairer, more peaceful, and more prosperous world, but a world also where values are present, a world where the human rights and democracy that we all cherish very much, but which have been a very hard conquest for all our countries, continue being values that are appreciated and hopefully will be more and more extended in order to create a better world. And I think that's really what's at stake, more than those other issues, if you take them apart, which may sound interesting and important, but I think you have to look at them in this broader ensemble.
I'll come back to some of the points that you've made there. I do just want to laser in on migration again, because my honest view is that if there were more concessions given by the EU during the 2010s and the negotiation period up to the UK's EU referendum on free movement, I do think the population would have voted to stay in the EU. There was a sense that there was no movement, no flexibility whatsoever on free movement. And I think that, in my view, is the leading reason why a lot of people voted for Brexit. They wanted control over borders, and free movement was not able to do that. So that brings me to my next question, which is, I know there's ongoing discussions around the youth mobility visa scheme, which I fully welcome. I think it's a sensible thing to do. One of the big drawbacks of Brexit is it's been harder for young people in the UK, for example, to go and live, study, work on the continent. And that, I think, is a bad thing. Now, the thing about the youth mobility scheme is that with the other countries that we have an agreement with, there's about 13, there is a capped number of places that the UK gives for people to come and study in the UK or work or whatever they want to do. It's actually, there's not much requirements on a youth mobility visa. And equally, there's the same reciprocal number of capped places for UK people to go to the country that we have an agreement with, say Australia or Canada. Is it the case that the EU is happy to have a capped number of places on the youth mobility scheme, or is it seeking complete free movement on that as well?
Just a little note on free movement. To say that, and I'm not going to enter into the discussion, the pre-Brexit discussion that's for historians to look at. But I do want to say that free movement for Europeans and for all member states is a very important part of what we are, and actually has helped most states and most new member states in their development as they joined the European Union. But in most cases, what you have had is a lot of returns to their own nations of people that had at some point moved out in seeking a better world. But in reality now, because there's this possibility of movement, because there's greater prosperity, actually you don't see big movements of population within the European Union. Most, and if they move, yes, it's maybe because they have at some point a better opportunity in one place or the other. But it has not led to huge movements of people. And when it has led to, it has also seen reverse movements at some points. And in any case, it's also a way of let's say, in liberal terms, of a better, let's say, distribution of resources in a given economic context. But it's reversible, especially reversible when you see that by joining the European Union, many of the countries that join have then developed very substantially and have received, again, not only workers from their countries, but also from other European countries. I come from a country that was a migration country in the 60s, 50s, 60s, early 70s, which is now a country that receives migration. And so I don't think that this is immovable. I think it's dynamic and actually responds better to Adam Smith type of logic, economic logic, in terms of freedom of movement of resources that at the end find better balances. But that's on free movement. And on your concrete question on the youth mobility scheme, there's no aspiration whatsoever at this stage to move into anything close to free movement in terms of youth mobility. We have agreed with the United Kingdom in the common understanding to ensure that first it will be a sort of a visa type scheme. So no one has a right, to just move to the other country without, no, you have to request to move. So it will be a controlled scheme, and it will be for a limited period of time and non-renewable afterwards, because it will have to be up to the negotiators to decide. Would it be 2, 3, 4 years, or 1 year? I don't know. This would be what the negotiators will have to decide. Hopefully, a reasonable time so that everybody can benefit from a reasonable study period. But it would be for negotiators to determine the period. So visa, limited time, and then they've also agreed to ensure that the numbers are acceptable to each other. So there's a very nice formulation that I cannot recall exactly, but it means what I've just said. It doesn't talk about capping, but it does say that numbers will have to be acceptable to each side. And therefore, very far away.
And that does mean there will have to be some form of cap for the UK side.
Or some kind of monitoring and control mechanism. So it can be done in different manners. But what it is clear is that no one will get more than what it is prepared to receive. I can also say that since Brexit, there is a constant outflow of EU citizens from the UK at a rhythm of between 60, 90,000 per year. So that's just something to bear in mind as well. Net outflow. So just as an additional element of
No,
context.
very interesting. And it's interesting what you say about, there was deep skepticism in the UK in the noughties and 2010s about quite a significant number of Eastern European migrants coming to the UK. We didn't have transitory controls, which other European nations had in the mid-noughties. But actually, there's been quite a spike in net emigration of those Eastern Europeans back to particularly Poland, which we know has been experiencing very strong growth and living standards. And even there's been a kind of quite relatively high levels of emigration of Brits, but there's now evidence to suggest a lot of those Brits are actually Eastern Europeans who gained British citizenship, who are now returning home. So an interesting point you make there. Just to remind people watching, please do, if you want to ask a question, you can ask a question through the Slido link. Tell us your name and what your question is. My next question to you, Ambassador, is around the very good point that you make about the world that we live in, to compete with the economic giants of the US, China, and increasingly India. Europe, if it acts together as one big market, can play in that superpower league. And I agree with that. But there's obviously a feeling that countries like the UK don't want to go in the same direction that other EU countries want to go in terms of federalizing. So that raises a point which I think Macron has talked about, which is this sort of two-tier Europe, and whether we might have a bit more flexibility around an outer tier, let's call it EFTA or EEA, which exists at the moment, the UK being part of that. Whether you can envisage a situation where the UK is a kind of central part of that outer tier, as access to the customs union and the single market, is a member of EFTA, but maybe has a bit more rule-making powers, not just rule-taking powers, and whether that two-tier Europe might accommodate the different attitudes that different European countries have to what Europe is, but together creates this one big market which can compete in the superpower status. Is there a receptiveness to that in the EU, or is there a feeling actually we should be sticking together following this one model that most EU member states are in?
I think the European Union is very much open to working with partners in a variety of manners, and it has shown this. And of course, the European Union is open to decisions that any member state may make. And then the United Kingdom decided to leave the European Union. It left the European Union and it decided to pursue another path. Now we're in a situation where we're seeing how, despite the fact that it left the European Union, how can we strengthen the bonds and the links? And here, I think that so far we've been very open and keen to ensure that the United Kingdom can associate itself to many European initiatives and projects, because we believe that this, at the end, strengthens all of us. And we want a strong United Kingdom. It's good for Europe. It has been so in the past. It remains so. As the United Kingdom should, and I think it does, want a strong European Union, not a weakened European Union. If if European Union nations want to build a strong political union and stronger policies on a number of areas, I think that would be equally good for the United Kingdom, and it should see it in that way. Now, when you step out of the single market, you cannot then ask to continue being a rule maker for the single market. And I think that is very clear. So the path that the European Union will follow in building its own internal structures, it will be for member states of the European Union to determine. We will always be working with an open door to our partners, particularly to partners in Europe, because this is our closest family, because this is what helps us become stronger together. And we have very much that continental feeling of needing to build it. By the way, if you take into account that we're 27 member states, we have 10 candidate countries, and I think the EPC is around 47 nations. So the bulk, when accession, if it will continue to be, it will be successful, and there's a strong commitment to do it. So basically, all European nations, practically all, except a few, will be part of that hardcore. And the hardcore will continue making the decisions for the hardcore. It will, of course, take into account in how to engage better with others. It will open many doors to others. And in how those doors will be managed, it will be co-decision with others, of course, but how its own policies, its own structures will be managed, and that will be for member states to decide.
Let's look forward 10 years. So we're in the mid-2030s. What would be the ideal relationship between the EU and the UK from the EU's perspective? Would it be the UK being back in the EU? Would it be the Norway model, the Swiss model? What would be the ideal thing for the EU? What does the EU want the UK?
The ideal thing would be a relationship as close as possible on which there's political consensus in the UK. That would be the ideal thing. It is important that the relationship is not an element of political strife. It is important that the relationship is seen as valuable by political forces in the UK. So it is not for the European.
Do you think rejoining would, if the UK decided to rejoin, do you think that would be more of a problem and cause more strife or not?
This is for the UK to determine. I mean, you're better placed than I am to judge on what such a request would mean in terms of the political.
Sure, but say we decided to do it, do you think the EU would feel that the UK being back in the EU would be a net benefit or a net disadvantage? Would it be more of a troublemaker, or would it be adding a lot more value?
I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think very important that there's understanding within UK political forces of what is it they want in their relationship, and that this is not conflictual. What I can say from the EU perspective is that, yes, we're in a path towards a very strong Europe. And the more we face external challenges, the more we realize that we have to become stronger together. And I do think that historically, if I look at the last years, actions that would go against that not only would be a minority or a very strong minority within the EU, but would not help the project move forward. So we need the project to continue moving forward. It will be for member states to decide. Maybe they decide to stop it as it is now, and so be it. Maybe they decide that in order to be stronger together, we have to bring in even more elements in common of policy, areas that we have not explored yet. That could happen because, as you said before, we are in a very complex world with very big competitors, and we have to be as strong as we can in order to face that. So it is that perception of how strong do we need to be and what other areas do we need to explore for joint action that will determine what the EU will continue becoming. But what it is very important for the EU is that whatever we become jointly and in full agreement. Those member states that are within the EU have to be in full agreement and have to buy into that project heart and soul. And that is important. My view, but I'm a personal view, is that the way things are right now internationally, there will be additional areas where we will need to strengthen further our joint action. But that is my view. It will be for the Council to decide. And I don't know what it will decide. I do not know what will happen tomorrow and even less in 10 years. But as regards the UK part, the only thing, the UK or whomever wants to come closer to the EU that has not done so yet within Europe, it is important that there is clear commitment to the direction of travel and no division within that society, because a society that approaches us half-heartedly, let's say, may or not with not sufficiently a consensus. That's what I wanted to say, reality. Without a clear consensus on what that will bring, then it can be complicated because disagreements can increase and then can make life more complicated for that society and for the European Union. That'd be bad on both sides.
Yes, God help us if we have a referendum of in or out every 20 years and we keep going in and out of the EU. That would not be good. Right, I'm opening it up to questions now for the last 10 minutes for people watching online. So just a reminder to people, please do ask your questions through the Slido link just below your the YouTube TV that you're watching. I've got a question here from David Cope, who has asked about the European Convention on Human Rights. There's talk about us leaving the ECHR to deal with the issue of illegal immigration. How would that change the relationship with EU member states if we were to leave the ECHR?
Here are a couple of comments. First, the European Convention of Human Rights, is not an EU convention. This is a convention of the Council of Europe, and the Council of Europe is a different organization. It's not because sometimes there are confusions there, and it's easy to be confused because that's a Council of Europe, but within the European Union, we have a European Council and a Council of the European Union. So, and all of these mean different institutions within the EU and nothing to do with the Council of Europe. So Council of Europe, different convention. It's a different organization within which there's a convention for human rights. And this convention is critical. Critical because it sets the standards of respect for human rights amongst European nations. Standards that are very important for the European Union itself, because respect for human rights and democracy are at the heart of the European project. It's essential for those that want to join. It's essential for those that are members and are working within the European Union. We have clauses to protect democracy and respect for human rights within the European Union. And again, there's a convention which is broader than the European Union. It covered before all countries, including Russia at some point, was a member of the convention. And so it's a different story. Now, the Convention of Human Rights is included as a reference in terms of how we both understand respect for human rights in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And also, it is an element of reference actually in the Good Friday Agreement, and therefore also in the Windsor Framework. So respect for that convention has been included as elements that are essential for the key treaties that are currently regulating our relationship. Different question is whether is on interpretations of the convention, the challenges that it may raise to certain states in addressing irregular migration. And I think that is a debate that some are encouraging in Strasbourg, and it's a debate that, if that is what members of the Council of Europe want to have, can be had in Strasbourg. But the convention is the question, the problem, the convention or the interpretation of the convention. So they're different, and I'm not an expert on these issues, and I don't want to go further than that. But these are different issues. What I can tell you is that yes, right now the convention is an integral part, and respect for the convention, of the agreements that have been signed between the European Union and the United Kingdom. But there are discussions going on in Strasbourg regarding the interpretation of the convention, and those will have to continue their path.
Great. Another question here I've got from Josh Woolley, who asks, does the EU fear a reform government in the UK?
The European Union does not fear European Union does not fear any government in a democratic country. It will work with governments in democratic countries. We are working with the present government. We would certainly not want to speculate on who will win or not next elections in the UK nor anywhere else. So, but we will work with governments, democratically elected governments within our partners, and we will work as best as we can. We think that we have a common agenda with the UK that is very important, and that, in my personal view, again here, will be very important regardless of the government. This is not, as I said at the beginning, this is an indispensable relationship. Another thing is whether the government acknowledges it fully or not and acts upon it or not. Now we are working with a government that acknowledges and that is working to make this relationship as strong as possible. And in that regard, I want to say that this is very much welcomed on the side of the European Union, and we're very glad to be working with the present government to strengthen the relationship, because it will strengthen Europe, it will strengthen the European Union, it will strengthen the United Kingdom.
Great. Another question is from an anonymous person who asks, do you believe there is scope for more alignment similar to the SPS agreement on other technical matters, e.g. chemicals?
Again, all these are questions that will need to be looked at when we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For the time being, we're working on this. I think if we have alignment will always be good in any case. And we have our norms. We are so any alignment that towards where the EU stands will be helpful for the relationship. That in any case.
Great. And then I've got a question from Jack Forsyth, who has asked about EU enlargement. Whether there is an expectation that the EU will enlarge in over the next decade, and which countries do you expect to join?
There's a commitment to enlargement. Our political bosses have even indicated that within the mandate of this commission, which will therefore end, is it 29 or 30? Let me add up. Which will end in 2029, just before 2030. It's June. I think the next elections would be June 29. So before June 29, there is a political commitment to have enlarged to a number of additional countries. If you look at the reports issued by the Commission on enlargement just a few weeks ago, There are a number of countries that are considered front runners right now. But in any case, it remains to be seen. All the progress that needs to be made could be made by many, whether they're front runners or not. And we will, the European Union will be deciding on the basis of merits of the different candidates, and the decision will be taken obviously by the Council when this is presented.
Great. I've got a final question, which is from Dr. Will Prescott, who asks about illegal migration. Obviously, that's risen quite strongly in the UK since the start of this decade. And he asks whether leaving the EU has made the situation worse in terms of increasing the number of illegal migrants coming to the UK, as Macron indicated earlier in the year.
That's really for British authorities to reply to that question. There are numbers that are issued in terms of channel crossings, in terms of migrants that come legally and then overstay. What I can say is that the numbers of legal, and I think all of ours are legal, and if they're not legal, they're quickly sent back. But all the EU citizens living in the UK, they are those that were here and are entitled to under the settlement scheme, were here before, and actually many are coming back to the European Union. As I said earlier, we have an outflow of EU citizens around 60, 70,000 a year.
Sorry, Ambassador, just to correct you, if it wasn't clear, I think the question that Will Prescott was asking was about asylum seekers. So those people crossing the channel seeking asylum in the UK, that has increased, and that's increased since we left the European Union. So the question is, as Macron indicated, is the UK leaving the EU contributing to an increase in asylum seekers coming to the UK?
I think, again, for the UK authorities to reply to that question, there are numbers, and the numbers speak for themselves. Whether it's an outcome of leaving the UK or not, again, President Macron, of course, is a very I would not dare contradict President Macron. So he has made his statement, and on my side, I don't want to make a statement on this.
Okay, thank you. Final question for me, which is, what do you think EU member states miss the most about the UK not being in the EU? What did the UK contribute most when it was in the EU, and what are EU member states missing?
I don't know member states. I can tell you my own personal experience. Not as a member state, because I represented a member state for many years as an EU official. And we have amazing member states and professional representatives, but I have to say that professionals and officials from the UK are really outstanding. And the vision they bring in terms of their international outlook, their knowledge, their deep knowledge of issues, and imaginative approach very often to problems was a great asset. Of course, we have many other states that contribute. I would say all our states contribute with very brilliant professionals to our efforts. But I personally enjoyed thoroughly working with officials from the United Kingdom. I learned a lot from them. I dealt during many years with military issues. I remember what setting up of the Operation Atalanta was, with the way very creatively British military strategies started developing ways in which, with very little means, you could associate other naval forces to a joint effort. It was really impressive. So yes, I personally, but this is me personally, I enjoyed the professionalism and the sense of state. I would say the sense also of state in terms of a European Union and the project and the attachment to the project that so many UK officials brought during their time working for the EU. I think I'm very privileged. I'm here in London. I meet many of them. I continue working here with extremely brilliant professionals, and I'm sure that it is working together, again, UK and the EU, that we're going to be able to move Europe as a whole towards safer and greener pastures. And what a privilege to be here, and what a privilege to have had the chance to speak with you this afternoon. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ambassador. Very, very interesting, and we're very grateful for your time and thoughts, and wholeheartedly agree that the UK and the EU having a stronger relationship is beneficial for both partners and for the world generally. For those of you watching at home, just to say there's a little break. We've got Christmas coming up, but we have some great lectures coming up in the new year. One is with Professor John Bew, who was recently the Foreign Affairs Advisor in number 10. He's going to be talking to us about British foreign policy in the 2020s. And also a Ludgate Lecture with Professor Eric Kaufman from the University of Buckingham on Have We Gone Beyond Woke? Has sort of, are we past peak woke? So two very interesting but very different lectures to look out for. So for me now, just to sort of give a virtual round of applause to the ambassador for his thoughts. We're very grateful. And to everyone else, have a great Christmas and thank you for joining us.